As of today, withdraw from all of the family businesses. Rachel, the second-born daughter of Count Lesseltine, was standing in front of her father, Count Lesseltine, as he said that he had tried to give his second child a fair chance, but he was mistaken. He then asked, "What do you think of this plan, Raymond?" "It was a nice idea but short-sighted," said the firstborn son of Count Lesseltine. "Realistically, it was difficult to succeed within the empire's market. After exploring it thoroughly, there was no profit to be made." Rachel thought, "Oh, isn't that the proposal for a waffle maker? I guess I'll have to redirect my plans." Raymond then said that from now on, she should leave the family businesses to him and focus on her engagement. Her father replied that he had already written a letter to the imperial palace. Rachel asked, "A letter to the imperial palace?" He explained that he would push for her engagement to the crown prince. Rachel was shocked. "His Highness the Crown Prince? An engagement?" He replied that since she had desired it so desperately, he had already given the letter to a servant, and the carriage should have left by now. Suddenly, Rachel rushed out, shouting that she was leaving. Her father asked where she was going. As the servant was handing over the letter to the carriage, Rachel reached him and told him to wait. The servant asked what was wrong and whether there was a new item she certainly wished to buy. Rachel asked him to give her the engagement letter. As she held the letter, she tore it apart and declared that, as everyone knew, it was a fickle matter. She had just blocked one of the routes toward destruction. That's right. The romance novel centered around a female protagonist called Leave the supporting cast alone. 2 days ago, Rachel had possessed one of the novel's characters, a girl who had lived happily with her parents and younger brother. In her previous life, she had succeeded in joining a large company and worked in its overseas department, yet she eventually passed away due to overworking. She had wanted to attend her younger brother's entrance ceremony. Still, she had lived a wonderful life. If only she had not been obsessed with baking. The bread she made was surprisingly delicious, and she had dreamed of saving enough money to open a bakery. After getting used to the transmigration, she started looking forward to her new life. This world possessed all kinds of tools powered by magical energy. Her family seemed to have amassed enormous wealth through the production of such magical tools. Indeed, it was the prestigious Lesseltine family. The one who brought the family to ruin in the original story was the villainous Rachel. Almost every business she touched failed. She harassed the female lead until she finally received punishment. Since Rachel had memorized the original story thoroughly, she believed she could avoid that downfall. Now nothing could stop her bakery. That was how her passion for baking began to burn even brighter. Rachel's father then asked whether she had torn up the letter containing the details of the engagement. Rachel replied that she had. She handed him a paper and stated that it was her new business plan. It was transmigrated Rachel's first business proposal. Her father replied that he would allow it, but under one condition. If she failed once more, she would marry the owner of the Danave merchant. The leader of the Danave merchants was Daniel Danave. Rachel thought that it probably would not work out anyway. Daniel claimed to be politically neutral, there were no negative rumors surrounding him, and his family was highly respected. In the original story, he was one of the male leads. It seemed her father truly cared about his daughter. Even though the family remained neutral, he had still considered an engagement with the crown prince. However, Rachel disliked the idea of getting married without her consent. She agreed that if her business failed, she would obey. Her father replied that he understood and that once it happened, she would come crawling back. Rachel answered that it would only happen if she failed. Her father then asked where she planned on opening the bakery. Rachel replied that it would be on Lilfrost 7th Street. She wanted to operate near the Duke of Hesse's residence. Her father pointed out that there was no geographical or economic advantage there. Rachel could practically see the little hope he still had in her slipping away. In the end, the Count purchased the building for her. The landlord was the Count himself. How convenient. She did not even have to pay rent. Although she did not yet have enough funds to obtain a loan under her own name, she did possess an untouched mind. Rachel's personal maid then asked whether she was truly going out alone, dressed as a maid and without an escort. Rachel reassured her that she would never be scolded for this and asked her to keep it a secret between them. Matilda promised that she would, assuring her lady that she could trust her. She would be careful not to get caught until Rachel returned. Rachel thanked her and said she would be in her care. As expected, the attitude change after a bribe was immediate. Although Rachel relied on Matilda, the maid was still ultimately employed by Raymond. Still, Rachel liked people who were transparent and easy to understand. While traveling, a man asked whether she was running an errand for Miss Rachel. Rachel replied that she was and that it was quite important. The man remarked that she seemed to be a new maid and that it must be difficult since every maid who worked for Lady Rachel eventually wanted to quit. Rachel thought it felt strange being criticized for something she had never even done. Thanks to that misunderstanding, However, the man seemed willing to give her a ride without even knowing her. He then asked where she was headed. Rachel answered, Citron Square. In reality, her intended destination was somewhere else. She simply wanted to avoid Raymond hearing about her plans. From now on, she was going to earn her own money and run her bakery. It had been half a year since Duke Karhan Hessen last came to the capital. Though he traveled to the borders every year for monster subjugation, it always felt like a long time had passed whenever he returned. But now that the report was finished, he should head back to his territory. Suddenly, Duke Karhan Hessen rushed towards something. His assistant asked what it was. The Duke replied that someone had posted an advertisement on the street trees. The assistant immediately responded that he would check whether it was authorized. The Duke told him to leave it. The assistant thought that the Duke must be angry and that he should remove it quickly. After getting off his horse, the assistant realized that the poster was nowhere to be seen. The Duke had already put it in his pocket. Back at Grace's place, a lady asked who the person she was here to see was. Grace replied that she was looking for bank president Robert Deneve and that she had urgent business regarding an investment. She then asked for a moment to catch her breath from the carriage ride. The lady informed her that if she wished to meet the bank president, she would need to schedule an appointment and return later. Grace thought that of course she would not simply be allowed inside. There was no other choice then. She had not wanted to attract attention, but suddenly she threw herself onto the floor and shouted that if that was the case, then she wanted to meet the head of the Deneve Merchant Guild. She loudly called for Daniel Deneve. The lady was startled and asked why she was suddenly looking for him there. She immediately called for the guards. The guards grabbed Grace and demanded to know why she was asking to meet the bank president's sworn enemy right there. Suddenly, someone walked in and asked what all the commotion was about. It was Robert Deneve, the president of Citron Central Bank. Grace immediately said that she had come because she knew of a solid investment opportunity. It was related to expanding into the Able Kingdom's market. She asked for a moment of his time. Robert then invited her into his office and instructed the maid that there was no need to prepare tea. Grace noticed this. As he lit a cigarette, she remarked that there was no need to set the mood either. He replied that he knew she disliked the smell of cigars. Grace immediately called that nonsense and pointed out that he was the one holding his breath right now and should be honest. Suddenly, he told her to sit down. Daniel Deneve, the head of the Deneve Merchant Guild, and Robert, the president of Citron Bank, were supposedly twin brothers who despised each other so much that they never met. But in reality, after Robert's death, it was revealed that his younger brother Daniel had been playing both roles all along. Rachel thought that even if she spent 24 hours thinking about it, it still would not be enough. Maybe because she had died from overwork in her past life, she could not help feeling bad for him. As far as she knew, Robert had never met her before. For someone of his stature to openly ask about her sources would put her in a difficult position. Rachel then pulled off her hat and decided that she should at least introduce herself. She revealed that she was Rachel Lesseltine of the Count Lesseltine family. Robert replied that he had no interest in high society and had never seen Lady Lesseltine in person, though he had heard she was an exceptional beauty. Rachel immediately washed her face and thought, see? She was obviously Rachel Lesseltine. Beauty? Could he possibly have different tastes in women? She had never expected this kind of situation in a romance fantasy. Realizing she had no other choice, Rachel once again collapsed onto the floor. Robert quickly told her to wait a moment and called for tea, shouting for someone to make sure she did not collapse. As they sat down for tea, he said that before they continued, she needed to promise to keep his identity a secret. Rachel agreed. She then revealed that next spring, diamonds would become all the rage in Abel's high society. Investing in diamond mines now would guarantee massive profits. Robert replied that coming from a Lesseltine, it certainly sounded like credible information. However, the entire world outside the empire was facing famine due to sandstorms, and the diamond mines had completely dried up. If she would not even reveal her sources, what reason did he have to trust her or do business with her? Rachel then pointed out that he had been preparing for wheat exports, hadn't he? This upcoming food crisis would make wheat the empire's greatest asset. She had come there to help him, Daniel. The entire world was suffering from a severe famine caused by widespread sandstorms. Fortunately, the empire avoided a direct hit, but merchants took advantage of the situation by exporting wheat from within the empire at higher prices. At this rate, even the empire's wheat supply could become scarce. To prevent this, the emperor sought a solution. In response, the crown prince proposed a temporary ban on wheat exports. This decision earned him overwhelming support from the people. Rachel explained that the crown prince was keeping a close watch and that a crackdown would begin soon. No one, including the Deneve Trading Company, would escape their surveillance. She then suggested that all the wheat should be burned before it was discovered. Daniel replied that such an act would be unforgivable even to the people. Rachel asked what he proposed instead. Daniel responded that Lady Lesseltine must already have another solution. She had come there to strike a deal, so if she told him an alternative to burning the wheat, he would give her what she wanted in return. If she offered another method, he would compensate her accordingly. Rachel replied that she appreciated the direct approach and requested a covert account at Citron Bank under President Robert. Daniel immediately rejected the idea, saying it could damage the bank's credibility. Account access was restricted to the owner, and a covert account should not be necessary. Rachel countered by asking what would happen if someone from her family offered a bribe to access her account. A dishonest employee might be tempted. Daniel then suggested lending her an account under his own name, but Rachel refused. That would give him the opportunity to claim her money as his later. Daniel responded that he had always conducted business based solely on trust. If she could not trust him, then she could trust no one. Rachel admitted that his confidence was impressive and agreed to use his account. She then revealed that behind building number 7 on Lilfrost Street, there was a large warehouse. She would leave it open so he could store the wheat there. Daniel pointed out that it was dangerously close to Duke Hassan's estate, one of the Crown Prince's most trusted men. Rachel replied that the best hiding place was often right under their noses. He could move it there without worry. Besides, the warehouse belonged to Rachel, the failed businesswoman. No one would question why raw materials were piled up there. Daniel thought that such confidence could only come from someone who truly knew what she was doing. As payment for renting the warehouse, Rachel requested that he sell her some of the wheat at half price. Daniel replied that since he needed to get rid of it anyway, he could sell her all of it. However, he suspected that she intended to donate a portion, didn't she? Daniel had secretly been involved in charity work for the less fortunate. During a famine, the people who suffered the most were not the nobles or the wealthy, but the poor, especially children in orphanages. Rachel revealed that there was an orphanage on Lilfrost Street number 12. All unsold bread and pastries from her bakery would be donated there. She added that she planned to make a lot of delicious bread and pastry. Daniel was surprised and asked if she was serious. Rachel replied that thanks to the affordable ingredients she had secured, it would be possible. With that settled, she suggested drafting the contract. Daniel agreed immediately but suddenly remembered something and asked for the name of the diamond mine they were contracting with. Rachel replied that it was the Hector mine. Daniel was shocked. That was an abandoned mine where only copper had ever been discovered. Rachel calmly stated that diamonds would soon be extracted there. She then teased the mysterious identity holder, asking whether he trusted her information or not. Daniel replied that he would pay any price if she would simply tell him her source. Rachel only responded with a playful later. And so, a contract with strict penalties for breach was finalized. In addition, for the time being, all diamonds extracted from the mine would be exported exclusively to the Kingdom of Avil. With the supply limited, the price of diamonds within the empire would skyrocket. Even then, wealthy nobles would eagerly open their wallets, allowing them to sell at exorbitant prices and use the profits to donate even more. Daniel praised the idea as brilliant and said it was an honor to work with her. It had been a successful negotiation that secured both a distribution deal and an exclusive mining contract, as well as a huge victory in obtaining flour for the bakery. Later, back in the kitchen while cleaning, Rachel complained that her back hurt. She wondered if everything was good enough, but there was still bread to bake before sunset. To make the bread, she gathered flour, yeast, sugar, salt, milk, eggs, and butter. The ingredients tasted slightly different from the ones in her previous life, so she needed to find the perfect recipe all over again. Flour, yeast, sugar, and a pinch of salt went into the bowl. She adjusted the ratios in separate bowls and carefully took notes for each attempt. Then she poured the egg and milk mixture into the bowl. Once the dough began coming together, she kneaded it thoroughly. The process made her incredibly happy. She wanted nothing more than to bake bread in her own shop forever. She remembered the first time she had baked bread and how happily her little sibling had eaten her failed attempt. She wondered whether he was doing well without her. Then she suddenly remembered that the Rachel of this life also had a sibling. Countess Lesseltine had suffered multiple miscarriages after giving birth to Raymond. Overcome with grief, she adopted a child, and that child became Rachel Lesseltine. Later, the Countess successfully gave birth to a younger daughter. Her existence eventually turned Rachel into the so-called villainess. Rachel had originally planned to give the best loaf to the Count, but perhaps she should give one to her younger sister too. Family relationships were always safer when they remained friendly. After the secondary fermentation was complete, Rachel removed the meringue cookies from the oven. She then placed chunks of dough into the bread pans and began baking. All she had to do now was keep repeating the process until she found the perfect recipe. While reading a letter that suggested delaying mining operations to avoid the Crown Prince's surveillance, Rachel thought that she should write back in a roundabout way to indicate that she expected proper money laundering. Suddenly, someone entered and informed her that young Master Raymond had asked her to stop by his office after lunch. Rachel replied that if he had something to say, he could come and meet her himself. At that very moment, Raymond appeared from behind and said that he had a feeling she would say exactly that, so he had come personally. Rachel immediately wondered what this man wanted from her now. "What do you want?" "I'm a little busy right now," Rachel said. Raymond replied by asking whether she was leaving the house. Rachel asked who had said that and sarcastically wondered if he had come to praise her for it. Suddenly, Raymond grabbed Rachel by her clothes and shouted that it was ridiculous. After what she had done to Isabel, did she really think leaving the house would make everything disappear? He continued by saying that the only reason their father had not disowned her was probably because of their mother's last words. Rachel paused. Her last words? Thanks for telling me something that wasn't in the original story, she thought. But had he actually asked their father if it was true? Raymond angrily called her a bastard and shouted that instead of being grateful, she had pushed her own sibling into the pond and was now acting completely calm. Rachel responded by asking if that meant she was a bastard too. She then stated that she never planned to leave because her bakery was here after all. If he had already said everything he wanted to say, then he should just leave. Raymond replied that she was planning to leech off this place forever and, after struggling to find the words, called her an orphan before storming off. Later, Matilda tried to guess what Raymond might be thinking right now. Perhaps even he had not thought that far ahead. Rachel decided to assume it was something like that. After bribing Matilda, she asked whether what Raymond had said was true. Matilda immediately replied that she would never believe such rumors, but unfortunately they were already treated as facts throughout the mansion. Without Rachel's memories, the situation was even more complicated than expected. Isabel, in the original story, had helped paint Rachel as a villain by overreacting and spreading unconfirmed rumors. Rachel had assumed she would not be like that since she was still young, but could it really have been Isabel? Meanwhile, the doctor informed Rachel that Lady Isabel had not regained consciousness yet. Rachel asked if he could step aside for a moment because she wanted to be alone with her. The doctor explained that Lady Isabel was not in a condition to eat and asked Rachel to refrain from bringing food in for the sake of her recovery. Rachel replied that it was not for her. If Isabel had been awake, she would have given it to her. After the doctor left, Rachel looked at Isabel and thought that her hair looked like fresh strawberry jam. As she gently touched her hair, Rachel felt that something was off. Now that she had actually met her, it felt as though Rachel genuinely liked this child rather than resenting her. Rachel softly told Isabel to wake up. When she did, Rachel promised she would make all kinds of delicious food for her. Maybe a slice of cake topped with fresh strawberries, or soft bread filled with blueberries. Homemade cream cheese spread on warm bread sounded good too. They could even share a moist tiramisu with a fork, although Isabel would probably end up with cocoa powder all over her mouth. Rachel promised that once she woke up, she would spoil her with so much bread, so she should hurry up and get better. Later, Rachel returned to the kitchen and continued baking. The freshly baked bread needed time to cool down, while the loaves that had already cooled needed to be packed away. For the grand opening, she would probably focus on the best-selling bread, but for now she wanted to try baking all kinds of varieties. She would not let a single customer slip away. That way, she could buy the building from her father even sooner. Suddenly, someone called out to Rachel from behind. She turned around and was shocked to see Isabel standing there. Isabel said that she had been so scared that she might die. Holding Rachel's hand, she thanked her and called her sister. Rachel asked what she was thanking her for. Isabel replied by asking what she meant. Rachel had saved her when she fell into the pond. Rachel was confused and wondered how Isabel could even remember that when she had been half conscious in the water. Isabel explained that while she had been half asleep yesterday, she heard Rachel's voice and knew for sure. The rumors and the truth were completely different. Rachel was left wondering how she should respond to that. For now, she decided to give Isabel something to eat. She offered her some bread and explained that she had made it specifically for her. Isabel happily accepted and thanked her sister, saying that she loved it. Suddenly, Raymond burst into the room and demanded to know what Rachel thought she was doing. Rachel could only stare in disbelief. What was he doing here again? Raymond demanded to know why Isabel had been brought there without permission and what Rachel was feeding her. Rachel calmly replied that she had not known Isabel was coming and that she was only giving her some meringue cookies she had made herself. She then asked Isabel how they tasted. Isabel happily replied that they were absolutely delicious. The cookies Rachel had given her were so sweet and were the best she had ever tasted, so Raymond should not be too angry with her. Isabel then asked if he still did not understand. Ever since Rachel had ended up in this world, no one had ever taken her side. Yet now Isabel was actually standing up for her. Isabel then asked Raymond what he had been doing when she fell into the pond. She explained that she had been terrified, but Rachel had fought off a giant octopus monster with a whisk. She had even defeated a mansion-sized lizard with an oven tray. On top of that, Rachel had promised to bake her lots of delicious bread once she got better. Rachel was left wondering whether Isabel had simply dreamed all of that when she visited her in the infirmary. Either way, Isabel had already spoken. Rachel told Raymond that she did not care what he thought about her, but surely he was not planning to ignore his precious little sister. She then asked how Isabel had even found her. Isabel explained that she had offered money to anyone who could tell her where Rachel was, and one of Raymond's servants had brought her straight there. Rachel nodded. That certainly explained it. She promised Isabel that she would make her something even tastier next time. One day before the bakery's grand opening, Rachel looked around and realized she really needed to clear out the weeds. However, she also wanted to try making a few more items before opening day. The bread dough was fermenting in the oven's residual heat, and the wheat Daniel had planned to export had already been processed into 2 different types of flour. In other words, she now had everything she needed. This time, she was making pumpkin muffins. If they turned out well, they would be a hit with everyone regardless of age or gender. To make the pumpkin muffins, she prepared pumpkin, cake flour, butter, eggs, sugar, almond flour, baking powder, and several other ingredients. First, she boiled the pumpkin. Part of it was sliced into crescent shapes while the rest was scooped out. Next, she mixed all the ingredients together to create the batter. She piped the batter into muffin liners in a circular motion, placed the pumpkin slices on top, and put them into the oven. Meanwhile, the bread dough had finished rising. Rachel decided to add the leftover pumpkin to that as well. After doing a quick round of weeding and returning, the pumpkin muffins were finally done. As she tasted one, she thought that the moist texture was exactly why she had used boiled pumpkin instead of pumpkin flour. It would pair perfectly with fresh cream. Then she suddenly realized something. Had she baked too many just for practice? What was she supposed to do with all of them? She was already baking bread too. Then she remembered that she had planned to donate the leftovers. In that case, she should bake even more. Hopefully, the children would love them. Later, Rachel introduced herself to Catherine, the director of the Stabilo orphanage. Catherine warmly welcomed her and remarked that it was wonderful to have such a kind neighbor. Rachel replied that she looked forward to getting along with her. There was no need to reveal her last name. Catherine thanked her for donating the leftover bread and commented that it seemed just as warm and inviting as freshly baked goods. Rachel explained that since it was her first day open, she had miscalculated how much to bake. She then asked for a small favor. Would Catherine mind giving her an honest review of the bread she had brought today? She would love some feedback. Catherine readily agreed and suggested that everyone try it immediately. The children became excited the moment they saw the treats and quickly gathered around them. They exclaimed that the bread was amazing. One child even said they could live off it forever, while another declared that they wanted to learn how to bake bread too. Rachel laughed and explained that ovens were very hot and dangerous, but once they were older, she would happily teach them all kinds of tips. Until then, she would keep baking for them. For a brief moment, Rachel thought Catherine's eyes flashed blue, but she wondered if it had simply been her imagination. Concerned, Rachel asked whether the bread did not suit her taste. Catherine immediately denied it. The rich aroma and perfect texture made it exceptional. It would even make a wonderful gift. Rachel thanked her for the kind words. Catherine continued by saying that out of all the bread she had ever tasted, this was the best. Rachel's bakery was bound to succeed. Hearing that the children loved it so much, Rachel promised to bring some over from time to time, even on days when everything sold out. With that, she prepared to leave and wished everyone well. As she headed back, she wondered whether the bread had not sold well on opening day. Everyone who tried it had offered such genuine praise. It looked fine to her. Then Rachel smiled to herself. It was finally time to show her kind-hearted neighbor what real money tasted like. Customers lined up outside the bakery asking whether there was any good morning bread available, if it was possible to place large orders in advance, and what time the bread and muffins would be ready. Rachel cheerfully explained that the good morning bread was on the shelf over there and that she would help them with their purchases. She also informed them that they were currently preparing a reservation system, that bread came out in the morning, and that muffins were usually available around lunchtime. Looking at the crowd, Rachel could not help but wonder why the place had become so popular. As customer after customer thanked her and wished her a nice day, everything eventually sold out. Business was booming. Rachel thought that life really was all about luck. Maybe when she had time, she should consider turning the second floor into a living space. As she gathered the money she had earned, she thought that she should eat something first. Today, she was craving mint chocolate chip cookies. However, she had also been thinking about taking some to Isabel. What if Isabel was not a fan of mint chocolate? Rachel could already imagine Raymond seeing her spit it out and shouting that she was a jerk for feeding Isabel something so disgusting. He would probably call her a villain all over again. To be safe, Rachel decided to make chocolate chip cookies too. She would add some nuts to make them extra nutty. To make the mint chocolate chip cookies and nut chocolate chip cookies, she prepared mint chocolate, chocolate chips, nuts, cake flour, butter, eggs, sugar, baking powder, and salt. Since she could not find mint chocolate anywhere in this world, she had made it herself. First, she melted white chocolate and added peppermint oil and food coloring. Then she piped it into small shapes and allowed it to harden. After that, she mixed the prepared ingredients to make the dough and divided it into 2 bowls. She added chopped chocolate chips to one bowl and mint chocolate chips to the other. Then she kneaded the dough until no dry flour remained. She reminded herself to be careful not to overmix it, or the cookies would become tough. Next, she dropped rounded spoonfuls of dough onto a parchment-lined baking sheet. One batch was topped with teardrop-shaped mint chocolates, while the other was topped with nuts. Once the oven had finished preheating, she placed the cookie dough inside and waited. Before long, the cookies were finished. The aroma was wonderfully nutty. Rachel hoped Isabel would like them too. Later, Rachel went to visit Isabel. Isabel happily asked whether Rachel had come to see her. Rachel replied that of course she had. After all, she had promised to make her delicious bread and desserts. Isabel excitedly asked what she had made this time. Rachel told her to guess. Isabel insisted on smelling it first. Rachel agreed but told her to keep her eyes tightly closed. After taking a sniff, Isabel remarked that it smelled nutty and guessed that Rachel had made cookies for her. Rachel confirmed that she was correct and encouraged her to try them. Isabel happily picked up a cookie, took a bite, and immediately declared that they were delicious. Rachel smiled and said she was glad Isabel liked them. Isabel replied that she was so happy Rachel had baked cookies specifically for her and confessed that she really loved her. Rachel warmly replied that she loved Isabel too. Suddenly, however, Rachel felt something was wrong. Standing nearby were her father, Raymond, and the doctor. The doctor explained that Isabel had recently become sick because of nuts and absolutely must not eat them anymore. Isabel obediently replied that she would not eat nuts again. She admitted that she was scared she might die, but these were cookies that her big sister had made. If she refused to eat them, everyone would doubt Rachel's abilities again. People were always saying that Rachel could not do anything right. So Isabel had decided to endure it as much as possible and tell her sister that the cookies were delicious so that Rachel might finally receive some praise. Earlier, when Rachel had asked how the cookies tasted, Isabel had already begun feeling unwell. Suddenly, Isabel collapsed. The servants immediately panicked and shouted for a doctor to be called at once. They hurried to provide first aid as quickly as possible. Hearing the commotion, Rachel's father rushed over and demanded to know what was happening. Then, after seeing the situation before him, he turned toward Rachel and asked if she had fed Isabel nuts. Isabel had a nut allergy? Rachel had no idea. It had never once been mentioned in the original story. But did the original Rachel not know either? Both the Count and Raymond had shouted at her. Then they turned away with disappointed expression. Rachel could feel that they had truly given up on her. The next day, someone knocked at her door. It was Daniel. He asked whether she was all right. Rachel replied that she was. Daniel then asked whether there was any connection between the items she had asked him to bring and the unusual decision to close the shop. He had initially thought it might have something to do with the suspicious individuals lingering around the bakery. Rachel explained that it was probably her brother's doing and that she would explain everything later. Daniel nodded and informed her that the number of suspicious people had decreased, but they would continue maintaining the guards. They could not risk letting anyone discover the warehouse. Rachel was surprised. So the number had decreased rather than increased. They must have assumed she was about to close the shop. Changing the subject, Rachel offered him a Madeleine. Since he had arrived so suddenly, she had only brought out a few of the ones she had left, but they were one of her specialties. Daniel immediately replied that he did not eat food that had not been verified. Rachel shrugged and said that was fine, then she would eat it herself. As she took a bite, Daniel quickly changed his mind and said it was all right. Now that he had seen her eat it, he would give it a try. The moment he tasted it, a faint blush appeared on his face. He admitted that it was delicious. Rachel happily informed him that starting tomorrow, she planned to make condensed milk madeleines as well. She then asked whether he was curious about the recipe. Daniel asked whether she would tell him if he was. Rachel replied that she would, provided he offered proper compensation. She was already considering expanding the shop if business continued to go well. Daniel commented that he had heard she was terrible at business, but that rumor seemed completely false. Putting that aside, he turned the conversation back to business. Lately, he had been seeing products from her bakery everywhere. He had even heard that they were becoming popular among noble ladies. Rachel was surprised and asked about the noble ladies. Daniel explained that even the previous Duchess Hessen had spoken highly of her bakery. He then asked whether Rachel had any connection to her. Rachel immediately replied that she could not think of any connection at all. If she had the opportunity to meet the Duchess, she would run there faster than anyone. After all, it would allow her to build a relationship with the greatest bread enthusiast and a potential VIP customer. Daniel still found the situation suspicious and advised her to lay low for the time being. The Duke's side was likely watching them. The conversation then shifted to franchise royalties. After discussing the details, Daniel suggested finalizing everything after observing sales for a little longer. Rachel agreed and reminded him that she had promised active support for the franchise as well. She also added that she always prioritized better condition. Before he left, she asked whether he was heading to the Merchant Guild. Daniel replied that he was and that he would be working there until dawn. Rachel stopped him for a moment and handed him a gift. She told him to take it home and eat it. Work was important, but he needed to take care of his health too. Daniel blushed slightly. Rachel continued by reminding him to eat proper meals. Daniel thanked her and said he would consider the Madeleine's payment for the items she had asked him to procure. The herbs she requested would arrive before sunrise. Later, as Rachel received the herbs and began working in the kitchen, she hoped this would work just as it had in the original story. However, the smell was absolutely awful. There was no way she could eat it as it was. Since it was about time to develop a new menu item anyway, she decided to make bread that could be eaten alongside it. This time, she prepared blueberry bread. The ingredients included bread flour and fresh blueberries. The method was similar to making regular bread. First, she sifted the bread flour and prepared the dough. Then she thoroughly washed the fresh blueberries and allowed them to drain. After kneading the blueberries into the dough, she placed it into a mold and baked it in the oven. Before long, the blueberry bread was ready. Finished. Now she needed to hurry to the Count's mansion. If she delayed any longer, Isabel might. As Rachel entered the mansion, Raymond glared at her with complete hatred and declared that she had a lot of nerve showing up after what she had done. Rachel remained calm and simply told him to move aside. She had something for Isabel to eat. Raymond came charging down and shouted that Rachel was completely insane. He demanded to know if she was really trying to kill Isabel this time. Rachel quickly denied it and explained that she needed to give Isabel medicine to suppress the allergic reaction. Raymond suddenly slapped Rachel across the face and demanded to know how he was supposed to believe her. Rachel pleaded with him to trust her just this once. She reminded him that she was his sister too and would never hurt Isabel. Raymond coldly replied that he had never, not even once, thought of her as his sister. Rachel's hands trembled. Raymond then shouted for her to get out and never come back to the mansion. He did not want to see the likes of her ever again. Suddenly, Rachel punched him in the face as hard as she could, knocking him to the ground. She demanded to know what exactly he wanted her to do. If he was going to keep making Isabel suffer, then he could go ahead. Her poor little sister was stuck with both a terrible brother and a terrible sister. Raymond fired back, saying that if it were not for Rachel, Isabel would have been much happier. Rachel angrily told him not to make her laugh. If that were true, then why had Isabel come looking for her? At that moment, the Count arrived and asked what all the commotion was about. He then turned to Rachel and asked what she was trying to feed Isabel. Rachel hesitated before explaining that it was a rare herb that was difficult to obtain, combined with several unusual ingredients. The Count was surprised and asked how she had even come up with such a thing. Rachel explained that a talkative pharmacist customer had told her about it some time ago, and she had provided plenty of extra service in return. In reality, this medicine was something Daniel had desperately created for the protagonist Euphemia in the original story. From behind the Count, Raymond shouted that Rachel was trying to give Isabel medicine that even doctors had never heard of. He insisted that it absolutely could not be allowed. The servants also began speaking up. They questioned how anyone could trust Miss Rachel and suggested that she might be deliberately lying. Others repeated the accusation that Miss Rachel had tried to kill Miss Isabel. Rachel wanted to protest and say it was not true, but she knew nobody there would actually believe her. The Count finally spoke and declared that this would be her last chance. Rachel was confused and asked what he meant. The Count explained that if the medicine she had brought did not work as she claimed, then she would no longer be his daughter. Furthermore, That day would be the last day she was ever allowed to set foot in the mansion. He admitted that a family should at least have a minimum level of trust in one another. However, Rachel had indeed put Isabel in danger, so he could not fully trust her. She would have to prove herself. Did she understand? Rachel calmly replied that she understood. Later, Rachel entered Isabel's room. Filled with a tangle of complicated emotions, she handed Isabel the medicine. Isabel drank it, and after a long and exhausting day, everything finally came to an end. The servants soon began whispering among themselves. Had they heard the news? Miss Rachel had healed Miss Isabel. Later, Rachel asked Isabel whether she was really that happy about getting better so quickly. Isabel replied that she was happy about that, but she was even happier that Rachel had come to see her. She then explained that Brother Raymond had always told her never to eat peanuts, walnuts, or similar foods. She apologized and admitted that she hated them. She had only tried to endure it. Rachel gently reassured her that it was all right. Everything had worked out in the end. She could not stand seeing Isabel in pain either. Rachel then asked why she had done it. Isabel replied that it was because she did not want other people speaking badly about her sister. While they were talking, a maid brought in the blueberry bread Rachel had baked. It was so delicious that even after a single bite, everyone was impressed. The maid enthusiastically praised Rachel's skills, saying they truly were amazing. She admitted that she did not understand why Miss Rachel was surrounded by such awful rumors. No matter how many stories people made up, they simply did not match reality. After saying that, the maid excused herself and left. Once Isabel's condition had improved, Rachel began thinking seriously about the situation. It seemed that it was not merely bad rumors spreading around. There was clearly something more going on behind the scenes. For the after-meal dessert, we have yuzu pound cake and raspberry cake, Your Excellency, said the servant. The Duke replied that he would pass on dessert and asked for some tea instead. The servant acknowledged the request, while one of the guests remarked that everyone said the desserts at the Duke's residence were a must-try. The Duke's head maid certainly had excellent taste. Another servant commented that the head maid's taste reflected that of the Duke himself. Count Duchin then expressed his gratitude that the Duke had invested in his accessory business and promised to do his utmost if entrusted with it. As the desserts were served, the Count was immediately impressed. The raspberry jam was exquisitely layered between the cake sheets. If it were sold separately, he would gladly buy it. The yuzu pound cake was equally incredible. Its aroma and texture were in perfect harmony. Despite not usually being fond of cakes, he found it truly amazing. Suddenly, the Duke placed both hands on the table and announced that he had just remembered an urgent matter. He suggested ending the conversation there for the day. Count Duchin was startled and pointed out that they had not yet finished discussing the collaboration contract. The Duke simply replied that they would meet again later. After the guests left, the Duke picked up the cakes and returned to his room. As he ate them, he thought that while the taste was excellent, something still felt missing. Then he noticed the vanilla-flavored advertisement from Rachel's bakery and thought that thanks to his mother, he now had a reason to visit. However, he had heard that the bakery had closed only a few days after opening. What on earth had happened to the owner? Meanwhile, back at the mansion, a maid came rushing in. She insisted that even if Rachel interrogated her, she knew nothing about the pond incident. As she had said before, she was primarily on young Master Raymond's side, so even if she did know something, it would be difficult for her to say. All she knew were the rumors circulating around the mansion. Rachel quietly bribed her. The maid then admitted that not only had she heard the rumors, but she had actively helped spread them as well. Despite having wide connections throughout the mansion, she still did not know who had originally started them. Rachel offered more money. At that, the maid finally revealed that she had heard it was Maid Joan who had increased the credibility of the rumors. Rachel praised Matilda's honest nature when money was involved. Matilda bashfully replied that Rachel was too much. She then explained that Joan had provided the crucial testimony regarding the incident. According to Joan, on the day of the accident, Miss Isabel and young Master Raymond had been walking together. After Isabel wandered away from Raymond, she had been looking into the fish pond. Suddenly, Rachel had appeared and pushed Isabel straight into the water. That was the testimony Joan had given. Even now, while public opinion throughout the mansion was beginning to shift, Joan was still using the private room she had received for witness protection. Hearing this, Rachel decided to visit her personally. Upon entering the room, Joan nervously asked what had brought Miss Rachel to such a humble place. Rachel replied that she simply wanted to ask about the pond incident and wondered how much Joan had been paid to lie. Joan immediately acted offended and asked what kind of nonsense Rachel was talking about. Rachel calmly replied that Joan was the one talking nonsense. She knew the testimony was false. Joan demanded to know what grounds Rachel had for making such accusations. She insisted that she had seen everything clearly with her own eyes and accused Rachel of trying to slander a witness. She even remarked how disappointed the other masters would be if they heard such things. Rachel found it ridiculous. Even though she was an adopted daughter, she was still technically Joan's employer, yet the maid dared to speak back to her so disrespectfully. At that moment, Matilda stepped forward from behind Rachel and pointed out that it was not slander at all. Joan had been in the courtyard, far from the pond, at the time of the incident. Joan froze in shock and asked whether Matilda had somehow seen her there that day. Matilda explained that she had not personally witnessed it. However, on that particular day, the head maid had urgently needed someone to work as a porter because a guest had arrived to discuss business with the Count. That guest had seen Joan in the courtyard. If it were merely a servant's word, that would be one thing. But if it came from one of the Count's guests, then it became solid evidence that Rachel could not have fabricated. The guest had initially thought they might have been mistaken, but if they asked the Count, he could surely contact the guest and confirm everything properly. Joan immediately began to tremble. Rachel calmly informed her that she had heard all of that, hadn't she? She was willing to give Joan one chance to avoid being kicked out of the mansion. All Joan had to do was tell the truth. Rachel then looked directly at her and asked who had bribed her to give a false testimony. Did you hear the news? Miss Rachel wasn't actually the madam's child. The servants gossiped among themselves. One of them wondered why the madam had revealed such a fact right before she passed away. Another replied that the more important question was why they should still call Rachel Miss at all. After all, she was supposedly just a commoner like them. Someone else agreed and suggested that perhaps the madam had revealed the truth because she was worried that Rachel might harm Miss Isabel. Thinking back on it, one servant recalled hearing that Duchess Sealda had been by the madam's side before her death. Perhaps she had wanted to ask her close friend for help. After all, how could they allow a commoner to remain attached to the Count Leseltine's household and enjoy such luxury and privilege? To them, it seemed outrageous and presumptuous. Back in the present, Maid Joan stood before the Count and finally confessed that her testimony against Miss Rachel had been a lie. The truth was that she had not been there at all. She apologized to Rachel for what she had done. Rachel thanked her for telling the truth and calmly asked who had put her up to lying. Before Joan could answer, the Count suddenly shouted, "Miss Rachel." Rachel immediately shouted back for him to be quiet. She demanded to know whether it had really been so irritating that she was an adopted daughter. She already knew that a girl with unknown origins becoming a member of the prestigious Leseltine family had always been a thorn in the servants' sides. The things they said behind her back were not something she had heard only once or twice. She had heard them countless times. Until now, she had believed they were not worth paying attention to. It was true that she was adopted, but she could not allow misunderstandings created by lies to continue. Raymond stood nearby, completely speechless. Unable to accept the situation, he questioned whether Rachel had simply bribed the maid. Before Rachel could respond, Isabel stepped between them and objected. She explained that Brother Raymond was wrong. Big Sister Rachel had simply happened to find her when she was sleeping. There was no culprit behind the pond incident. She had been saying that from the very beginning, yet nobody had listened to her. Isabel continued by saying that no matter how kind Rachel was, she should not let something like this slide. She wanted to use this opportunity to clarify the truth for everyone. She was not covering up for Rachel's mistakes. She was simply telling the truth. Listening to Isabel, Rachel began to wonder whether, in the original story, Isabel might not have disliked Rachel at first. Perhaps it was only because everyone around her constantly spoke badly about Rachel that she eventually came to believe she was truly a bad person. Rachel thanked Isabel for believing in her. Later, back in the Count's office, he asked where the head butler was. One of the servants replied that there was still no clear answer, but they had gone to search his room. Shortly afterward, a reply arrived. Someone had seen a maid presumed to be Joan somewhere other than the pond at the time of the incident. The Count was furious. Rachel had been framed, and such a thing had happened within his own household. One of the attendants carefully pointed out that if this incident became known outside the mansion, it would greatly damage the family's reputation. If they simply punished the head butler appropriately, time would naturally clear away the false accusations against the young miss. The Count remained silent as he considered the situation. Later, while walking through the mansion corridor, the Count came across the doctor carrying a tray. After greeting him, the Count asked why he was bringing it out of Isabel's room. The doctor explained that Rachel had brought it and that he was planning to dispose of it just in case. Hearing Rachel's name, the Count asked for the tray instead, saying that he would take care of it himself. When he entered Isabel's room, he saw Rachel sitting beside Isabel's bed, gently telling her to wake up. When she did, Rachel promised that she would make all kinds of delicious bread for her. The Count picked up one of the loaves Rachel had baked and took a bite. It was delicious. As he tasted it, memories of the recent incident flooded back into his mind. Turning to one of his men, he ordered him to investigate everything again. Isabel had claimed that the pond incident was an accident, but there might be a real culprit after all. The man was surprised. The Count then declared that he would personally question the head butler and deal with him. As for the matter of Rachel's innocence, he ordered that it be properly publicized both inside and outside the family. "Good morning. 2 loaves of toast, right?" Rachel asked. The customer confirmed the order, and Rachel informed them that the total would be 6,000 koros. After thanking her and wishing her a great day, the customer left. Closing right after opening had certainly caused some damage. The business was not completely dead, but that only meant Rachel needed to be even more prepared for her future VIP guest, Duke Hessen's visit. First, she decided to make some muffins and decorate them like cupcakes using the Duke's favorite ingredient, strawberries. Just as she was about to begin, someone entered the bakery. Rachel instinctively informed them that they were already past closing time. However, the moment she looked up, she immediately corrected herself and welcomed the customer inside. The visitor was Karhan Hessen, the Duke himself, the greatest knight who protected the empire from monsters and foreign nations in the north. However, he had been facing quite a dilemma lately. Earlier, one of his servants had been shocked after learning that a gift could not be accepted. The servant questioned how that could be possible when the Duke only accepted gifts in the form of food. Another servant explained that while they were truly grateful for the Baron's generosity, their master unfortunately had little interest in desserts. According to the previous head butler, the Duke only accepted them because food was still food. The servant apologized sincerely, explaining that they had only wanted to do their best for their master. The Baron replied that the Duke was fortunate to have such an excellent head butler. Meanwhile, the Duke mourned the loss of what he considered his emergency supplies, or rather, his precious dessert stash. Back at the bakery, the Duke thought that perhaps that was why he had not received a single sweet treat since then. Before he realized it, he had rushed all the way there. Thankfully, the bakery was still open. Rachel apologized that they were in the middle of tidying up but encouraged him to look around freely. The Duke's attention immediately landed on the cream cheese and blueberry toast. He thought that this bakery clearly understood flavors. Rachel then mentioned that she had prepared some samples and asked whether he would like to try one. Since there were no tables yet, he would have to eat at the counter. The Duke agreed. A moment later, Rachel served him a muffin topped with fresh strawberries and strawberry whipped cream. The Duke was immediately astonished. Before him sat a golden brown muffin, layered with sweet strawberry cream and beautifully arranged fresh strawberries on top. There was simply no way a combination like that could taste bad. He even thought it might be better if the bread were slightly chewier and softer. The moment he took a bite, he was overwhelmed. This was truly a heavenly taste. Rachel noticed his reaction and politely asked if everything was all right. The Duke immediately replied that he would be taking some of these. Rachel asked how many he would like to order and informed him that they were always ready for bulk orders. In that case, she added, they also offered special perks. The Duke was intrigued. Just placing a bulk order already made obtaining desserts easier, and now there were extra benefits too? Rachel explained that the bakery even had a membership system. VVIP members received a secret gift along with a very special dessert featuring a unique selection each time. Without hesitation, the Duke declared that he would place a bulk order. He wanted the most expensive item available. Rachel then informed him that she would prepare 20 boxes, each containing 5 macarons. The Duke paused. Macarons? What were those? Rachel explained that they were somewhat similar to dakois. They were a type of cookie made with round meringue shells and filled with various flavors in between. Even the name sounded delicious. Now that he had heard the description, he was even more curious. Meanwhile, elsewhere, several people were discussing the macarons. They questioned whether those sweets really came from Rachel's bakery. They certainly looked pretty, but no matter how attractive they appeared, they had been made by the woman nicknamed the reincarnation of Witch Margarita. What if they were poisoned? Others quickly dismissed the idea. After all, the Duke himself had chosen them, and everyone had been praising how delicious they were. That was enough reason for the famous kitchen assistant trio to investigate personally. They decided to taste them and deliver a thorough review. One confidently declared that they would critique them mercilessly. Choosing a macaron, they each took a bite. The moment the flavor hit them, they were completely shocked. This could not be real. The sweetness was perfectly balanced without being overwhelming. It combined crispiness, chewiness, and softness in perfect harmony. On top of that, the appearance was incredibly adorable. There was only one conclusion they could reach. This dessert was absolutely incredible. You seem troubled, my lady. The assistant's observation caught her attention. She asked whether it had really been that obvious. The assistant replied that it was rare to see her sigh like that. She reassured him that it was nothing and there was no need to worry. However, there was something she was curious about. Turning to Owen, she asked whether the macarons had truly been purchased from Rachel Bakery. According to the rumors spreading among the servants, the bakery's owner was supposedly that same Rachel Lesseltine who had once been called the disgrace of the Count's family. Owen explained that he had been curious as well and had looked into it personally. It was true. The owner really was the same Rachel, the woman infamous not only among the nobles but also among the commoners. Hearing this, she thanked Owen for keeping her company and told him he could rest now. Left alone with her thoughts, she reflected on the situation. As both the former duchess and the head of the orphanage, the bakery she had praised the most had turned out to be run by someone infamous for her alleged misdeeds. Yet the Rachel she had met could never be someone deserving of such a disgraceful title. So which side was telling the truth? As she picked up another macaron and took a bite, she remembered Rachel enthusiastically talking about creating a recipe using soybean flour as well, describing it as a flavor people of all ages could enjoy. The memory only strengthened her resolve. She needed to investigate this matter again. Meanwhile, back at the bakery, Matilda energetically declared that she would work as hard as the wages she received. Rachel laughed and told her yes, all the bread had already been baked, so she only needed to handle the checkout and packaging properly. Matilda agreed and wished her a good day. Watching her leave, Rachel thought that Matilda seemed especially cheerful today. Then again, Rachel herself was in a great mood too. It was all thanks to Duke Hessen. Thanks to his massive bulk order, her pockets felt very secure. Later, Rachel arrived at the Deneve Trading Company, where Daniel welcomed her. He explained that since Robert was unavailable today, he would be delivering the news personally. Rachel immediately realized that today she was dealing with the Daniel version. Living a double life like that had to be exhausting. Daniel then commented on the carriage she had arrived in. It looked rather shabby. He jokingly wondered whether the Lesseltine estate held some sort of ritual that rejected all the luxurious carriages they owned. Rachel replied that she had been returning from work and, for his information, that carriage happened to be the best rental available. Looking at Daniel, Rachel reflected on how different he seemed compared to Robert. While Robert was rigid and blunt, Daniel was much friendlier. If she wanted to be less generous, she might even call him a borderline delinquent. If she had not known the original story, she would never have believed Robert and Daniel were the same person. It felt like only yesterday that he had not even offered her a cup of tea during their first meeting. Now she had clearly become an important business partner. Curious, Rachel asked what kind of news was important enough to summon her all the way to the Deneve Trading Company. Daniel replied that it was news he believed would make her very happy. Just as she had predicted, high-quality diamonds had been discovered in the mine. However, if they wanted to sell them at high prices, skilled craftsmen would be essential. Rachel asked whether he planned to commission House Duesong. Daniel replied that he was still considering it. Rachel admitted that House Duesong possessed some of the finest craftsmanship available, but she was concerned about Duke Hessen. It seemed they had fallen under suspicion. Recently, the Duke had taken an interest in House Duesong's business. No concrete discussions had occurred yet, but the warehouse guards reported that he had visited Rachel's bakery after closing hours. There was a possibility he had noticed something and done it deliberately. Rachel admitted that might be true. Even so, leaving the Duke's misunderstanding unresolved felt somewhat wrong. Still, she had never planned to work with House Duesong anyway, so in a way it worked out. Count Duesong was a shameless con artist with a terrible personality. If only the novel had mentioned who the heroine eventually entrusted the crafting work to. Unfortunately, that detail had never been revealed. For now, Rachel decided to focus only on what she could control. She instructed Daniel to look into another jeweler instead. If the Duke was suspicious of them, they would simply have to play around it. Daniel laughed and remarked that the response sounded exactly like something she would say. Just in case, however, he handed her a backup business card and suggested that it might be wise to temporarily halt the mining operations as well. Rachel casually agreed before immediately changing the subject. Instead, she wanted to move up the opening date for the second store. She promised to pay him as soon as the diamond mining was complete and asked him to find a suitable location within Deneve territory first. Daniel quickly realized that she was trying to use up the wheat as fast as possible. Conveniently, there happened to be an unused building in the territory, and he offered to lease it to her for free. Rachel shook her head. She doubted she could keep using it for free forever. It would be better to decide in advance what the monthly rent would be once the wheat supply was gone. Daniel commented that it seemed they still had not built enough trust for a simple verbal agreement. Rachel replied that such caution was only natural with anyone. With that settled, she suggested drawing up a contract immediately. Meanwhile, as Matilda was cleaning the bakery, Irene suddenly walked in and asked whether she was really working at that villainous shop. "Matilda? That girl who's obsessed with money?" Irene was surprised. She asked whether they were still in touch. She admitted that she had never liked how obsessed Matilda was with money. Still, that girl was actually quite cute whenever she talked about money while munching her lips. A few months earlier, Matilda had informed Irene that starting the next day, she would be working under Rachel. Irene had been shocked. That villainous? Matilda had happily confirmed it and explained that she had volunteered for the position herself. Irene could not understand why she would do such a thing when Rachel had such a terrible reputation even within the mansion. Matilda simply replied that being a personal servant paid very well. After that conversation, they had both become busy and had not been able to meet for quite some time. Back then, Matilda had excitedly declared that she was going to make a fortune. She would come up with a plan to rake in money no matter what it took. However, she had also worried that such plans might cause a lot of people to suffer. Rachel had reassured her that if she did well, she would be rewarded handsomely. Upon hearing that, Matilda confidently promised that she should just trust her. She would bring the world to her lady's feet. Thinking back on it now, Irene could not help but wonder whether Matilda's obsession with money had really gone that far. Matilda quickly told her to snap out of it. She had been doing just fine. When Irene asked if that was really true, Matilda confidently replied that it was. She had even gotten the chance to see her lady again. At that moment, Matilda welcomed her into Rachel Bakery and suggested that they continue their conversation inside. As Irene followed her in, she glanced behind them and noticed someone standing nearby who looked strangely familiar. Perhaps it was just her imagination. Once inside the bakery, Irene asked whether Matilda was really saying that her lady was not a bad person. Matilda immediately told her not to get her started. The head butler had caused a huge mess recently. He had been bribing maids to frame Rachel with all sorts of false accusations. He had always taken pride in serving a noble family for generations, but apparently he could not stand serving a foster daughter who had originally been a commoner. Irene found it hard to believe that even the head butler would plan something like that. Matilda clarified that he had not necessarily planned it himself, but he had certainly allowed it to happen. After all, the young master of the Lesseltine family absolutely despised Rachel. Irene then asked about all the rumors. What about the stories claiming Rachel deliberately kicked servants out in the middle of winter when it was hardest to find work, or shoved them into stables full of manure? As they discussed the matter, a suspicious female customer nearby quietly listened to every word. Just then, another customer entered the bakery. Matilda greeted them as usual, but this new customer was actually Duke Hessen in disguise. Irene suddenly felt uneasy. She asked Matilda whether she had noticed that the two customers over there looked oddly familiar. Matilda dismissed the idea and told her not to be ridiculous. However, at that exact moment, the Duke accidentally bumped into the mysterious woman. He apologized politely, and she replied that it was all right. Yet both of them seemed visibly startled when they looked at each other. Matilda immediately became suspicious. Was that some kind of secret signal? She remembered Rachel's instruction. If she ever saw someone suspicious or dangerous, she was supposed to go through the back door. There was a warehouse past the alley, and guards were stationed nearby. All she had to do was call them. Turning to Irene, Matilda asked if she could watch the counter for a moment. She would be right back. Irene agreed, though she nervously wondered whether she could handle the packaging by herself. What if some suspicious people tried talking to her while she was alone? Then a terrifying thought crossed her mind. What if there was another suspicious person? Suddenly, Rachel walked into the bakery. Relieved, Irene thought that at least it was someone as harmless and cute as a rabbit. Rachel immediately complimented her packaging skills. Irene thanked her and asked whether she had perhaps forgotten something she had been looking for. Rachel simply replied no and headed upstairs. Watching her go, Irene became confused. Were customers even allowed to go upstairs? Meanwhile, Matilda returned with several guards and pointed toward the suspicious customers. She explained that those people seemed suspicious somehow and might have come to harm her lady. The moment the guards approached, one of the suspects suddenly ran away. Everyone was shocked. Why was he running? That made him look even more suspicious. The guards immediately chased after him, shouting for him to stop. They quickly managed to catch the other suspicious customer instead. To everyone's surprise, the woman identified herself as the head of the orphanage. Surely the guards remembered her. She explained that there was a reason she was disguised and begged them to keep their voices down. At that moment, everyone was left wondering the same thing. What on earth was happening in this bakery? Matilda stepped outside the shop and muttered to herself, wondering where that thug had gone. If she ever ran into him on the street again, she would make sure he got what was coming to him. Deciding there was no point searching any longer, she headed back inside the bakery. The moment she returned, she noticed that Iron had already folded a huge number of boxes. At this rate, Matilda joked that she might as well leave the entire store to Iron and take the afternoon off. Iron immediately asked what she had just said. Matilda quickly brushed it off and told her she was doing a great job. Returning to their earlier conversation, Iron asked whether all those rumors about Rachel were completely fake. Matilda admitted that she had been wondering the same thing herself. Even among the maids who claimed to have witnessed Rachel's misdeeds, there had been many times when their stories simply did not match up. Thinking back, even before Rachel opened the bakery, Matilda could not recall a single occasion where she had acted like the horrible person everyone described. When she first heard that Rachel had pushed Isabel into the pond, she had thought that it finally proved the rumors. Yet it turned out Rachel had been framed all along. So in summary, Rachel had never actually committed all those terrible deeds. Instead, she had simply been tormented by maliciously exaggerated rumors. Matilda agreed completely. She had blindly believed whatever young Master Raymond and Joan said and ended up thinking Rachel was some ruthless villainess. In reality, Rachel cared deeply for both of them. Listening from nearby, Rachel could not help but think that nothing won over Matilda's heart better than money. Suddenly, Iron noticed a familiar customer. Wasn't that Catherine? Catherine approached the counter and explained that she would like to pay. Matilda happily assisted her. Catherine then requested another large order of bread. In fact, she wanted to buy every single loaf currently available in the bakery and have all of it delivered to the Stabilo orphanage just down the block. Matilda immediately accepted the order and thanked her profusely. Watching the interaction, Iron commented that Catherine must really love the bakery's bread. Catherine smiled and admitted that she did. She also happened to know the owner quite well. Then she casually asked whether the bakery had sold any blueberry bread the previous day. Matilda replied that they had not. The bakery had been far too busy filling macaron orders to make blueberry bread. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. That was strange because Rachel had donated blueberry bread to the orphanage yesterday. Realization suddenly struck Iron. Did that mean Rachel had baked it fresh specifically for the donation? Catherine confirmed that it was true. Rachel never simply donated leftover bread. She always baked fresh batches specifically for the children. Rachel was genuinely a kind person. Embarrassed for overhearing, Catherine apologized, but neither of them minded. Shortly afterward, Matilda informed her that the delivery order was ready. Catherine thanked the two girls and affectionately called them little troublemakers before leaving. Watching her go, Iron found herself thinking that Rachel really was a good person after all. A little later, Rachel returned to the bakery. Iron immediately apologized and informed her that they had completely sold out of everything. Rachel replied that she had not come back because of that. She then asked if Iron was indeed Iron. Introducing herself as the owner of the bakery, Rachel smiled warmly. Iron was completely shocked. She immediately apologized and expressed what an honor it was to meet her. Rachel quickly downplayed it, insisting that she was not nearly as amazing as people thought. If anything, Iron possessed skills that Rachel would love to learn herself. Curious, Rachel asked what Iron did for a living. Iron explained that she worked at the Hessen Ducal estate and assisted in the kitchen alongside her younger siblings. Hearing that, Rachel immediately became interested. She asked whether Iron would consider working at the bakery. Rachel had been looking for a talented employee exactly like her. The offered salary was 6 million Caroso per month, along with bonuses, overtime pay, additional allowances, and a retirement fund. Iron could hardly believe her ears. Rachel then added that before anything else, she wanted to properly compensate her for helping out that day. She encouraged Iron to seriously consider the offer. With that, Rachel said goodbye and prepared to leave. Watching her go, Iron could only think that Miss Rachel was absolutely amazing. Meanwhile, Rachel wandered through the neighborhood once again. She had lost count of how many times she had walked these streets searching. Where had her future VIP customer gone? Had he already returned to the mansion? Surely he would not come back to the bakery, would he? Just then, Rachel sensed someone behind her. Turning around, she found herself face to face with Duke Hessen. He handed her an item and explained that she had dropped it. Rachel thanked him and, without thinking, referred to him as her dear gold customer. She even promised to provide plenty of special service next time. The moment the words left her mouth, Rachel froze. Wait a second. She was not supposed to act like she knew who he was. Technically, she was not supposed to know the identity of the mysterious customer hiding beneath that robe. Rachel quickly tried to explain herself, but Carhan simply replied that he had already had a hunch. It turned out that both of them had known each other's identities all along. Rachel was completely confused. He knew she was Rachel? She rarely attended social gatherings, so there was no way he should have recognized her face. He must have overheard Matilda and Iron talking earlier. Not that Rachel had really been trying to hide it in the first place. Curious, she asked how he had known when they had never met before. Then she immediately confirmed that she was indeed the owner of the bakery. It was time to act extra surprised. After all, this person was her future VIP customer, so she might as well put in some extra customer service effort while she was at it. Rachel asked whether he had enjoyed the macarons he ordered. She even mentioned that she had taken extra care when packaging his box. Karhan replied that the strawberry one had been decent. Rachel immediately became curious. Which strawberry macaron? If she remembered correctly, nearly 80% of the box had contained strawberry-flavored desserts. Karhan then wondered whether Rachel had somehow known he liked strawberries. Rachel casually explained that his eyes had never left the strawberry section of the display. Karhan nodded and admitted that it had been very good and very sweet. As expected, Karhan was not particularly skilled with words. However, he possessed an incredible ability to distinguish flavors. Even in the original story, he had been overshadowed by the kind-hearted Daniel and the charismatic Crown Prince. Still, while the other two relied on wealth and power to win people's hearts, Karhan was the only one who competed with sincerity. He genuinely loved desserts. Their Karhan was actually a pretty great guy. Later, back at the bakery, Matilda asked Rachel whether she was planning to make her own dress for the spring banquet. Rachel was confused and asked what she was talking about. Matilda explained that she assumed Rachel was working on a dress design. Rachel shook her head and said it was merely practice. She would probably have her dress tailored at Sabril, just like last time. Matilda seemed surprised and asked why she was not going to Elegance Boutique. Their designs had become incredibly popular lately. Rachel replied that she doubted she could go there after everything that had happened. Matilda immediately realized she was referring to that incident. Before Rachel could say anything else, Matilda grabbed a design and declared that she was getting rid of the dress immediately. Rachel was confused. Last time, Matilda had said she liked that design. Matilda suddenly changed her tune and claimed that she no longer liked it. It was not to her taste anymore. Then she carelessly remarked that commoners simply lacked refinement. The moment those words left her mouth, Rachel turned around and beat the living daylights out of her. While desperately trying to survive the assault, Matilda thought that she had spoken recklessly without thinking. She needed to apologize and smooth things over somehow. Suddenly, her eyes landed on a dress she was holding. Wait a second. Wasn't that the dress Rachel had designed? Looking back, Matilda remembered shouting at someone and demanding to know who had told them to throw it away. The answer had been simple. Miss Rachel had ordered it. Rachel had been furious. Unforgivable. As Rachel and Matilda recalled the entire incident, Rachel suddenly realized something. Wait a second. Didn't that mean Matilda had technically been the one who started the whole fire? Well, what was done was done. In the original story, Jack had been supposed to catch the Empress's attention at the spring banquet. After that, his success skyrocketed, and he eventually gained the heroine's favor. Thanks to the protagonist's influence, he reclaimed the position of top boutique and later got proper revenge on Rachel. Rachel had originally hoped to cut him off before that happened. Then another thought occurred to her. If she could catch Her Majesty the Empress's attention instead, it would generate incredible publicity. Matilda then suggested taking advantage of the unique nature of this year's spring banquet. This banquet was being held in honor of the Empire's 500th anniversary. She had heard that Her Majesty was putting far more effort into it than usual. Unlike previous banquets, which were attended mostly by young nobles, this year's event would also attract many middle-aged and senior nobles. She had even heard that the Count himself planned to attend. Rachel nodded enthusiastically. That was right. Then she suddenly paused and stared at Matilda. Did this girl even realize how valuable all this information was? Rachel asked where she had learned all of it. Matilda looked confused and replied that it was just common knowledge. She simply overheard things while going about her day. Rachel had thought this before, but Matilda gathered an absurd amount of information without even realizing its value. Since she had provided such a useful idea, Rachel decided to reward her. She handed Matilda some money. Matilda immediately accepted it despite having no idea what it was actually for and thanked her enthusiastically. Watching her reaction, Rachel came to a firm conclusion. She definitely needed to keep Matilda close from now on. Catherine spotted Rachel outside pulling weeds from the ground. She called out to her, and Rachel greeted Director Catherine warmly. Catherine looked around at the large number of weeds and asked whether Rachel was really taking care of all of them by herself. There were so many that she could not understand why Rachel had not called for help. Rachel laughed and explained that she thought it would be good exercise to pull them out herself. Besides, hiring people could be quite expensive. Catherine then asked what next week's recommended bread would be. If there was something new, she would love to try it. Rachel told her to wait a moment before hurrying inside. A short while later, she returned carrying something in her hands and asked whether Catherine would mind testing it for her. Catherine looked at it curiously. Was this the new injialmi macaron? Rachel confirmed that it was and explained that she was still refining the recipe. Excited, Catherine immediately agreed to try it. As she took a bite, Rachel carefully observed her reaction. The soybean powder made the macaron somewhat difficult to eat neatly, yet Catherine somehow managed to eat it with remarkable elegance. After finishing a bite, Catherine's eyes widened. It was absolutely amazing. The nutty flavor and subtle sweetness blended together beautifully. It was not overly sweet, making it easy to enjoy without feeling overwhelmed. Catherine then asked whether something was going on. Rachel seemed to be putting an unusual amount of effort into it. Rachel admitted that there was a reason. This time, she was planning a special event centered around the injialmi macaron. Catherine pointed out that the injialmi macaron was already popular among a wide range of age groups. Rachel agreed, but explained that because of the soybean powder, many people found it difficult to eat neatly. As a result, its individual recognition was not as high as she had hoped. That was why she had refined the recipe even further. Her goal was to make it famous enough to receive supply proposals for major events one day. Catherine repeated the idea with admiration. Rachel wanted to gain enough recognition to receive proposals for major events. Smiling, Catherine promised that she would be cheering for her. She was certain it would work out. Back in the kitchen, Rachel continued perfecting the recipe. First, she prepared the meringue. Then she sifted the powder and mixed it in carefully according to the correct proportion. The mixture was transferred into a piping bag and piped out little by little before being baked. She reminded herself to be careful not to set the temperature too high. Once finished, the macaron shells were complete. Next, she added boiled syrup to another batch of meringue to create the cream filling. The cream was sandwiched between the shells, and finally each macaron was rolled in soybean powder. Roll it, and roll it again. Before long, countless injialmi macarons had been completed. Looking at the mountain of finished macarons, Rachel found the situation almost strange. She had worked incredibly hard to prepare them, but she had not expected things to go this well. At that moment, Gray approached and asked whether she was all right. Rachel looked exhausted. Gray offered to wash the baking trays in the yard. Rachel thanked him but reminded him that he already had enough work with his escort duties. As a token of gratitude, she handed him one of the macarons. Gray thanked her and took a bite. The moment he tasted it, he seemed to ascend into another world. Rachel immediately knew it. Gray was one of them, someone who truly loved bread. Suddenly, a man burst into the bakery and shouted Rachel's name. Alarmed, he asked whether she was all right because she looked terribly pale and far more exhausted than usual. Rachel explained that she was fine and had simply gotten too much flour on herself while working. Relieved, the man said he was not particularly knowledgeable about bread, but he had come to report something suspicious. Rachel asked what it was. The man explained that there were suspicious individuals wandering nearby asking about something called injialmi. Rachel immediately shouted that injialmi was simply the name of a dessert coated in soybean powder.